Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're having what I hope will be an annual event at St. Catherine, and that is the best writing from our English majors, from our English graduates. And there'll be some nonfiction and some fiction. Jessica Shelton will be doing Breaking the Gender Binary. And then we'll have Will, who's doing a short story. And I might encourage him to do 2 short stories, you know, just to really see his excellence. And then we have Dalton, who's doing a short story. And we have Michelle Dunaway, who's doing a couple of poems. So, without further ado, I'll present Jessica Shelton.
Thank you. So my name is Jessica Shelton, and today I'll present my final paper for Dr. Tara Tuttle and Professor Nora Hatton's class, Gender Issues in Management. So this is Breaking the Gender Binary.
May I ask, just very quickly, can everybody hear well enough? Should it be amplified or is it fine? Okay, go ahead.
All right. Gender socialization begins as soon as a newborn exits the mother's womb. Society places a blue hat or a pink hat on the child based upon its sex. Therefore, society creates and reinforces a gender binary that affects every aspect within Western culture. However, what happens when that little boy doesn't like his blue hat and wants to don a pink tutu instead? The recent success of the Netflix original series, Orange is the New Black, has sparked many discussions about the lives and livelihood of transgender persons. I contend that the recent exposure of the transgender community will initiate a breakdown of the gender binary through means of adopting queer theory, leading to a safe and successful work environment for the LGBT community, and ultimately will result in gender equality within not only the workplace, but society at large. Orange is the New Black features an abundance of diverse female characters and an inclusive female prison. The main plot focuses on the life of Piper Chapman, a successful upper-class New Yorker who turns herself into law enforcement for a crime committed 10 years prior. Coincidentally, she ends up in the same jail as her former lover, Alex Voss. While Chapman's dramatic life would certainly contain enough material for an entire show, the series is packed with the dramatic and multifarious women. One character that has been the forefront of media attention is Sophia, the transgender woman of color, played by Laverne Cox, herself a transgender woman of color, who is an ex-firefighter and is married to a cisgendered wife. So for those of you who are not familiar with the show, the following clip includes Laverne's twin brother as they portray Sophia pre- and post-transition. So while Netflix has been operating for many years prior to the release of Orange is the New Black, it wasn't until this exclusive series that ratings reached an all-time high. Netflix was struggling to maintain subscribers, and stock shares were dropping drastically. The lesbian-focused prison show with a trans character and a non-celebrity cast saved the future of Netflix. More and more viewers subscribed to a Netflix membership in order to watch the show that everyone was talking about. The amount of attention that the show generated was remarkable. According to Dr. Courtney Ziegler, if you aren't talking about trans people, then you are missing out on what is an incredible, powerful media movement where our lives have become the catalyst for mainstream discussions of gender, sexuality, and even race. Riding the wave of this trans trend is Orange is the New Black. This series was a catalyst for education and discussion on gender at such a rate that was previously unheard of. Facebook feeds were full of articles, Tumblr bloggers couldn't stop posting about what is being called the most feminist show on television, and even the historically conservative TV Guide published a lengthy article on the subject. This type of coverage then leaks into the classroom. Students ask questions, professors are then challenged to answer with current responses. This conversation enables an education movement that fundamentally goes against the construct of a gender binary. Cox has been actively involved in this educational movement. Cara Tuttle Bell, former director of the Women's Center at Northwestern University and associate director of student conduct at Vanderbilt, where Laverne Cox recently spoke, commented that, through her speaking tour, primarily consisting of engagements at institutions of higher learning, Laverne Cox cleverly aligns her experience as a trans woman of color with the historical and ongoing efforts of women of color to be fully recognized as both women and citizens, both within the mainstream feminist movement and within society at large. Cox specifically references Sojourner Truth's famous speech, Ain't I a Woman?, but also references Simone de Beauvoir, Bell Hooks, and Judith Butler in her discussions on the complexities of living as trans and experiencing homophobia and transophobia, while also experiencing misogyny and racism. Sophia's role calls for attention to the multiple layers of discrimination of not only just a transgendered individual, but also an African American and a woman. According to Christian Schilt and Matthew Wiswall's research, transgender people have the same human capital after their transitions. Their workplace experiences often change radically. We estimate that the average earnings for female to male transgender workers increase slightly following their gender transitions, while the average earnings for a male to female transgender worker will fall by nearly a third. This finding is consistent with qualitative evidence that for many male to female workers, becoming a woman often brings a loss of authority, harassment, and termination, but that for many female to male workers, becoming a man often brings an increase in respect and authority. Laverne is able to portray some of the many struggles that have affected her life and many others. The prison acts as an unorthodox workplace, as inmates are given work assignments, and veteran inmates, like Sophia, have jobs showcasing their talents. Sophia works in the prison's adaptation of a salon, providing hair care for various ethnicities. Almost all of the women are surprisingly accepting of a transgendered woman living with them. Even the new inmates quickly warm up to Sophia's presence. However, part of Sophia's transition includes hormone treatments. She has to be provided a set amount of estrogen in order to maintain her feminine form. When the prison administration enforces medical cutbacks, they will no longer pay for the amount of estrogen that Sophia needs, but will continue to pay for a menopausal woman's estrogen pills. So this scene depicts one of the many ways that homosexual individuals face discrimination and ridicule for refusing to conform to the expectations of mainstream society. The LGBT community faces workplace discrimination at an alarming rate. According to a study conducted by Berman and Robinson pertaining to workplace discrimination within the LGBT community, 53% of the respondents reported that they had been harassed within the last 2 years based on gender or sexuality. In addition to workplace abuse, the number of jobs that transgendered are allowed to apply for are reduced. For example, the U.S. military places a ban on transgendered individuals. So while many would expect that Title IX would act as an umbrella, including transgendered, this has not always been the case. And it was not until March of 2005 that the court ruled in favor of a transgender plaintiff in accordance to Title IX. Many scholars are providing a solution to this injustice in the form of queer theory. This theory rejects the traditional categories of gender and sex. While binaries inhibit any variety of identities beyond 2 categories, queer theory acknowledges the fluidity and instability of multiple identifications. Diane Didz and Michelle Diart's article brings attention to the heterosexual/homosexual binary, serving as a form of social control preserving the status quo, or, more specifically, compulsory heterosexuality. Wherever there is a gender binary established, there is gender discrimination and inequality. So by implementing this male and female dichotomy, we are also establishing heterosexual relationships as the norm. By adopting queer theory in the workplace and in society at large, we will successfully dissolve the gender binary and the inequality and discrimination that comes with it. In conclusion, I fully contend that the Netflix original series Orange is the New Black has acted as a harbinger for an educational movement that will implement a queer theory society rather than a constricting binary culture. This will then enact a safe and autonomous work environment for all LGBT peoples.
My name is Will Phillips. I'm a senior in the English program, and I'm reading a short story that I wrote, I guess it was junior year, for a class that, creative writing class for Dr. Meadows. It is called Finale, and it's a little different. Stick with it. I hope that it pays off in the end. So, all right. The stars had all gone out. The blackness was complete. Entropy's victory was absolute. Most had died when blindness pervaded the universe, but there were a few yet that had retained their will to survive. It didn't mean much, not really. They all soon perished regardless, and before long, only one man survived in the entire universe, holding on to the willpower that kept his heart beating. Yet still, he felt it slipping away. He stood on what he figured was once a grassy knoll that overlooked the city in which he had been born. Now, it simply was. It wasn't anything in particular because things no longer existed in that way. Everything was part of everything, and everything was just black. He figured that he was the last one left now. In all of creation, the whole of the universe was black. He fumbled about in the eternal dark to try and sit, eventually plopping down unceremoniously to what had once been the ground. The suns had gone out one by one, and his was one of the last. They had seen the rest of the universe's lights go out. Communications had been lost early on, so they had sent out expedition teams to uncover what had befallen their comrades. They discovered entire planets, fried to a crisp by an early solar flare, the precursor to their destruction. The teams came back, all but one that had been caught in one such star's supernova. They thought they had time to fight it. What they had failed to realize was that fighting it was futile. Instead of developing a way of surviving, they had stubbornly tried to stand their ground, and entropy had enveloped them, just like it had enveloped everyone else. His family had tried to convince him that they would all be okay. But when the sun had exploded and burned the world, he had been the only one that had thought to go underground. When he emerged after he had lost all power in his hiding place, he had emerged to a world void of any life, jarred from an event that could not be quantified. His family, his friends, his life was gone. Perhaps somewhere one son had survived. Maybe there were people somewhere. He rubbed his forehead. Stupid, he thought. There's no one else. The only question that mattered to him now was how he would die. He had been a thinker in the world before. He had just been reaching his prime when the universe had died. He would have been wealthy. He would have been loved by all. He was promising. The most promising ever, some had said. Promise, he chuckled. What a funny thought. He lay down now on his back. He would have been looking at the sky. His father would have hated this. It was a grace that he had passed on before it had happened. They had never been close, and now he regretted it more than ever. He blinked his eyes, not that it mattered. The most pervasive aspect of this never-ending blackness was the lack of wind. No wind whistled through the streets, no summer storms blew up from the southern horizon. No leaves fell from the trees, no animals scurried about on the ground. That would probably be the death of him. He could live as a blind, lonely man, but he couldn't live without food. All the animals had died, and no one was left to tend the crops, so they too would soon perish. And for a while, he would still be left, the last man in the universe. He could try to write it down, but even if he succeeded, there would be no souls to read it. It was then that it truly impacted him. There would never be another living thing after he died. The essence of everything had died, and he soon would die with it. Then the empty black would turn for eternity. He knew that the fire of life would most likely never be reignited, and that was what scared him the most. It was then that he heard it. The silence that had pervaded anything and everything was suddenly broken by a sharp whistle from somewhere in the distance. His ears, unused for what felt like eons, were shocked back to life with a sudden reverberation of sound. At first he thought it was some animal that had somehow survived, and now let out a mournful cry for the fall of life. Then he considered the distant possibility that another person had survived and he might find companionship in this long, bitter night. In all likelihood, it was a dying bird. Still, he couldn't let the possibility slip away. He fumbled about for his own whistle. When he laid his hands on it, he yanked it from its sleeve on his back, and brought it to his lips. He blew into it the tone that was once used to say hello across distances great enough that voices could not be heard. The tone reverberated across the city below him and the mountains off to the north. He waited breathlessly for a moment. He was about to blow again when the reply came, not in the form of a whistle, but in the form of a brilliant light shining in the sky. His eyes burned as the world was illuminated again. The sky shone blue and the grass was green, and he could see the city below, still as dead as before, but somehow less morbid. The light was not the sun, as it was too close, but it was light, and his heart leapt to his throat as he let out a cry of happiness. Tears flowed in full now, and he stared directly into the light, ignoring the protests of his retinas. The light drew closer, floating down to his level. It dimmed a bit once it reached him, just enough so that he could look at it without pain. White dots loomed in front of his vision, partially obscuring the little of the world that was illuminated by this magnificent light. The voice danced at the edge of his consciousness, waiting to enter his mind. He felt it and let out his mental defenses, allowing the stranger passage. "You are impossibly strong," it said. The voice was neither male nor female, but rather words imprinted into his own mind and spoken by his own voice. "What are you?" he asked in amazement. "That is impossible to define. I am, and that is all that I can make you understand." "You are the cosmos, then, the essence of all that lives." "I suppose you could say that, if it helps you understand." He was overjoyed. The universe was not dead, at least not entirely. The voice was proof that something still lived. "How are you still alive? Everything is dead." The voice chuckled a bit. "I thought so. Clearly I was mistaken." He laughed for the first time since he had learned of the death of the universe. "Did you come to save me?" Now there was hesitation. When the voice spoke again, it was almost, but not quite, sad. "I cannot save you, but I can explain to you." He looked at the ground. It was the best that he could hope for. Salvation was unrealistic. "Okay then, tell me." The universe exists in cycles. Each cycle has an end. At the end of the cycle, the universe dies. It has to. It always does. And when it dies, I gather together the energy that remains, all the power left in the universe that would have kept it spinning in darkness for another 200, 400, maybe even 1,000 years. I gather it together, then expand it. When the dust clears, the universe is alive again. In the blink of an eye, it comes back to life, with no trace of its former self. The voice sounded joyous, almost ecstatic. He was dumbfounded. That's how it works? There will be another universe to replace this one? He thought he could hear a smile in the voice when it spoke again. Yes, it always goes on. There is always new life. He thought for a moment about what he had just heard. "Why can't you take me with you?" The voice sighed. "You are the energy." He was taken aback. "I am the energy that will begin the new universe. Me alone." "Yes, you will be the brightest star. You will shine for so very long, and all will see you." He pondered it. "Will I be alive? Will I be aware?" The voice took a moment before responding. "No, you won't be alive, but you will shine." He furrowed his brow. "You were shining if you were dead." He raised his eyes and stared into the light. "No." The light fluttered brightly for a moment, then dimmed again. With a tinge of anger, the voice spoke again. In the end, whether you want it or not, you will shine. He steeled himself. No, I will not. The light exploded now, blinding him. There is a cycle, it roared in his mind. It spread tendrils into his psyche, probing his memories, his life. It was taking hold, tearing him apart. It was draining the energy from his very being. He felt his body begin to rip apart from the inside out. Then a thought occurred to him. The voice was in his mind, not the other way around. He began to mount a counterattack, blocking out the incredible pain. He struck at one of the tendrils that the voice had planted in him, and it retreated briefly, but then struck back with full force. He continued to fight. He attacked again, and again the voice retreated. This time when it struck back, he was ready. He raised his defenses, cutting the voice off, trapping it in his mind. It struggled, writhing and lashing out. To hold it took an enormous effort. He was exhausted almost immediately. For a being that had lived so long, the voice was surprisingly weak. He figured that perhaps it had never been challenged before. Maybe all the other times people had simply given in, bowed their knees, and offered themselves up to it. But not now. He fought through the pain and eventually was able to subdue the voice, at least somewhat. It was a long battle, lasting hours, but eventually only the nucleus of the voice remained, cut off from the rest of its power. He was beginning his attack when another thought occurred to him. He didn't have to destroy this entity. After all, it kept the universe alive. It was important. He began to encase it, and it began to protest. Why do you want this? Do you know what happens if you become me? Do you know what it's like to live forever, seeing so many trillions die, seeing wars and sickness and eventually, always, entropy, the never-ending blindness? The voice was screaming, trying to shake him. He continued to build a wall around it, shutting it off. I will make a universe where entropy has no place, he said, where it cannot gain a foothold. A universe where people will love each other, care for each other. There will not be bloodshed and death in my universe. The voice was crying now. Do you not understand? I have tried. There is no escape from entropy. It will always prevail against any enemy that it meets. Once the wall was complete, save one block, just enough to speak and hear through, he spoke again. It hasn't met me. And he placed the final piece, completing the prison. As he stood there in that field, encapsulated by darkness, he realized that this was not the end. It was only just the beginning. The whole of space and time lay before him, and he planned to make use of it all. There was so much knowledge, so much to know, that he knew it all. A gift and a curse, he thought, and chuckled. He spread out his arms to each side and gathered all the energy from the whole of existence together, what little there was. It came together in his hands. He looked at it. So beautiful. It shines so brightly now. The first stars of the new universe. He brought his hands together faster than he had previously thought possible, and the energy exploded with a light like none he'd ever seen. Viciously, the universe spread, throwing planets and suns about in what seemed a haphazard order, but in truth was the only order in which they would all rotate, not collide or explode. He set the stars in the sky and saw that it was good. It was then that he noticed a small planet with no light and no land, only water and darkness. He hovered above those dark waters for a moment, contemplating what should be done here. He rather liked this world. Something about it spoke to the man he used to be. It was something so new, and yet so old, a voice echoing from universes long dead. One voice that had survived so much, and yet had not seen the truth, the way of defeating its only real threat. Then he smiled to himself and immediately knew the words. Let there be light, and there was light. So I guess we'll do the question thing again. Any questions?
Well, I was going to ask you if it's related to Catcher in the Rye, but I decided not to.
That might be a tall one.
Just, where did it come from? You know, what?
I don't know.
I mean, is it some? You know, what have you read that's similar, or you know?
Nothing. Well, the closest thing, I guess. I mean, at the time when I wrote it, I was reading a lot of Asimov, and there was a story. I think it's called The Last Answer or The Last Question. Yeah, there's one of me. I can't remember which one it was that I had read.
If it's you, it's not answered.
Oh, okay. Well, his story deals with a machine that can answer any question, and humans continue to ask it the question of basically what happens at the end of when the universe ends. What happens, and it never can answer. And at the end of the story, There are no people left, obviously, nothing left to ask it the question, and it finally processes an answer and just says, let there be light. It kind of came from that, I guess, and also within the context of a Christian religion, one thing that's I've always been curious about is the origins of God within that context, and so I felt like that was an interesting enough topic to explore. So that's what I did.
It's not a question, but I really like it. It's a very strong piece.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
Boy, how true that is.
Anything else? Okay.
All right, this is a short story called The Pitch and the Frenzy. As of right now, Mr. Lee, we cannot consider publishing this novel. Of course, all that work, 2 years of my precious time, and an untold amount of revisions all led up to that. Rejection. I cannot stress this to you kids enough. Don't try to become a writer. Just don't even think about it. Teach, fly planes, get hooked on smack and spend your life in the gutter, anything. Just don't write. You start off fancying yourself a real artist, thinking you can change the world, and realize real quick you're nothing but an orphan, searching for a home. Where was I? Oh yeah, the rejection. The smarmy little prick was trying to look all pained as he handed me back the final draft of my masterpiece. Either he's completely unaware of the effort I put into it, or he just doesn't care. And why would he? If you'd seen that room, you'd know what I mean. One wall was a massive window overlooking the skyline, and the other was covered with plaques, trophies, diplomas. Oh, and the first dollar he earned, in a nice glass frame. Yeah, he was one of those. But sir, I said, you don't understand. I have bills to pay. I can't just go out and get a job. I didn't graduate from high school. I dropped out to write. It's what I was put here to do. We're terribly sorry, but we just have too many clients at the moment. We've all been surprised by how many submissions we've had recently. It has its positives and negatives. Oh yeah, I shot back. I've seen the work of your other clients. Teenagers flying around on broomsticks, romantic vampires. You guys are going in the wrong direction, but that's okay. I can steer you in the right one if you'll just give me the reins. This man smoothed his tie more than anyone I've ever seen. It was, like every other thing about him, thoroughly annoying, but one almost had to admire his persistence in moving his hands over that silk constantly. All right then, Mr. Lee, the man said. I didn't want to get into this, but if I must, then I shall. We weren't particularly fond of your work. That was the fatal blow right there. Stephen Lee, born April 1st, 1988, died December 21st, 2013. Cause of death, decapitation. And now I was somewhere between forlornness and frenzy. What makes it worse than anything else? Jim Patterdale alone released 12 books last year. You know, the little mystery stories everyone loves? I read them all. Whatever happened to originality? Look, and now his not exactly Olivier-worthy portrayal of sympathy had turned completely into smug satisfaction. It's not a question of good and bad, original and unoriginal. It's a question of giving the public what they want. The public loves Jim Patterdale. They don't give a damn about Stephen Lee. They would if they knew my work, now feeling the tears, bringing with them the sting of failure. No one will ever know your work. He was really getting into it now, because you will never be published. Your novel was unbearably pretentious and consisted mostly of half-baked references to other superior novels. Here's one example. The entire second chapter, which ran from page 17 to page 42, consisted of a man preparing and eating a breakfast of eggs and toast. This is not fiction, Mr. Lee. I'll suggest to you what I suggest to every stream of consciousness hack that comes in here. Give up professional writing, buy a diary, and pour your thoughts into that, because I assure you that no one else will have any interest in reading them. At that moment, I could have leaped across the desk and wrapped his precious tie around his neck. But that would have been no good. All my stories ended with murders. My formula was becoming predictable, meaningless filler for a few pages, then somebody gets killed. It's important to spice things up, you know. On second thought, maybe the man was right. Maybe stream of consciousness just isn't my thing. I'm going to just toss this story in the garbage. Formula or not, I know what works for me. Suddenly, a masked man burst into the room and killed me. The end.
I just hope none of that was based on.
It was.
personal-
True event.
But it seemed like a really original idea for, I think I've never really read something like that, and I liked it. Have you gotten any other feedback on it?
Well, I submitted it to the creative writing class a while back, and it was pretty much it's original, but it's strange.
It is original, and that's a very important thing, because a lot of some writers really try to copy things that they like, but you have already really captured.
Oh, I've
a
copied
fresh-
plenty of people, believe me.
Well, sure, I mean, that's a natural impulse. We admire other writers, and it's only natural that we would emulate what we think is best. But you really have tapped into your own voice, which is kind of magical thing. I don't know what your future plans are, you two creative writers I just listened to, but I definitely hope an MFA is in your future, because you would really thrive in that kind of setting.
Thanks.
You know, MFAs are like this Stephen Lee character, they're unemployable. I'm just throwing it out there, but yes.
That is
please.
not true, don't listen to her. They're absolutely employable in English departments.
That is a terminal degree. You can actually teach creative writing.
You can
somewhere
teach,
with an
that's
MFA.
the deal you make, that's the deal you make.
You
You
absolutely
feed,
could.
you feed yourself and your loved ones with your teaching degree.
Keep in mind, Stephen King says you cannot, really hone your craft of writing if you're teaching at the same time.
Yeah.
Don't listen to
You
these.
need to be sitting in your closet as a typewriter.
Oh, wait, you know,
Just been listening to the,
we're totally,
say.
we're totally ignoring him, but to me, I don't agree with you on that. I mean, I think, I've read of people that have a full-time job and
Yes.
they work at night and they publish stuff, I mean.
Ball
it's-
State is full of them. They have a gigantic creative writing department full of faculty who teach full-time and publish prolifically.
For the record, they are not
You
Stephen
would not
King.
be the first. Everyone can't be Stephen King. but
Stephen
a lot of
King,
everybody
everybody
else
wants to
does
be Stephen
writing.
King.
King stopped teaching.
I'm gonna
because he
fight
said
with
it
you.
interfered with his
Don't
writing.
I have an idea for a story.
What's that?
I have an idea for a story. Two humanities professors get into a fight. Here's a good premise for you. Over being employable.
You keep in
Start
mind who's
with
the
that
creative writer, your
and
dog.
continue.
I like it.
And you can become a dean and then fire both of them.
He is right, you could.
Excellent. Next.
Okay, well, I was just going to read a couple poems for you guys. The first one I'm going to read is called Eyes. Okay. I have found your lies, I can see them in your eyes. You told me you would always be here, but where are you hidden now? I've searched my dusty attic, but you're nowhere to be found. I break my toes and toys, and I break my bones, but you both are broken. You told me that you loved one another, but what was said behind shut doors? I have searched my sore heart, but I can't understand the answer. I break down my fences, but I can't seem to let you in. We've had our fights, you said I was nothing, but I understood it wasn't true, and I fought with you and said you weren't true, but that really meant nothing. If the words you hurl at one another are hardly forgivable at all, I love you both with all my heart, but you've never loved one another. I have found your lies, I can see them in your eyes. Okay. All right. Next one's called Welcome. Welcome to the Broken Heart Club, where tears are lullabies and nightmares of the good things past torment the vision of these mangled minds. Welcome to the Hate Yourself Club, where scars are often found, and the only pain worse than our heartache is the pain of our bruised up bodies. Welcome to the Screw Up Club, where nothing tastes like candy, and the only flavor in our bitter mouths is the screams of our twisted tongues. Welcome to the Torn Down Club, where nothing done is right, and the values we used to hold as true become fables in our murdered memories. Welcome to the Broken Heart Club. You have all the characteristics for acceptance. Aren't you glad to join us? And the last one I'm going to read is called Orchestra. The bones of my bones functioned like guitar strings, while the hollow of my heart echoed my silent music to the deaf world around me.
And what did my music possess? It held my crumbling mind and my burning blood that pumped slowly through my sluggish veins to keep me alive. But the world is ignorant of my pain, and I am left alone to hear the tune of my ever-aching heart. I hear the notes echo deep in my tissues, and I feel the symphony within me. If no one else can hear my beauty, then I will find it on my own. It's in the tones of my singing ghost, and I will make this world finally hear me. My body is my orchestra. Are there any questions?
You're not nearly as dark as that second poem was. That's really
I
dark.
know.
I was thinking, I didn't know this child had this broken
No.
heart.
Oh, no.
Either that or she hides it very well. That's really what it is.
So this was our first, I haven't said anything
We
yet.
thought you were
But
reading.
you can
We thought you were
applaud, I
reading
just
something.
love it. This was our first reading of the graduating seniors in English, and we will continue this year after year. But maybe we'll continue it, I'd love to see it semester after semester, or is it possible to have it per month? Per week, I know is impossible, but per month, we could probably, might be able to have something like this. Have some sort of presentation of readings. And it might actually go better, if anybody has any suggestions about this, than just getting something published, which seems to be fraught with obstacles nowadays. But I think this will be a great way to promote yourselves, is to give maybe monthly readings. It's something to think about. So let's give a big hand for our graduating seniors. That's it, folks.